had about an appreciation of about 0.4985%. Now, if you've been following the headlines on the US stock market and also the bond market there's been, of course, a hike in the Federal Reserve rate. That is the Central Bank of the United States rate that has been increased over the past couple of months. And looking at the statistics here, this has been the greatest hike in over the past 14 years for the central bank rate in the United States. Of course, headline inflation has been one of the things that has driven the Federal Reserve Bank to push the hike, of course, to push this hike really to the wall. But of course, several investors across the globe, and critically those that are into the stock market, are saying the Fed is moving too fast in terms of hiking the yield, or rather the rate on the central bank rate there. And definitely this is harming the stock markets. But we're looking at the stock markets opening on Monday very strongly. On the other hand, the yield is kind of pivoting. And of course, some investors are saying this could be temporary. We could have this rate still go further up, according to some officials from the Central Bank of the United States, which is the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, according also to the US stock market at the Wall Street, we had earnings from the market's biggest players there on the US market. The S&P 500 edged higher about 0.9% through the midday trading, while the Dow Jones ticked up more than 1%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq also rose by about 0.4%. However, on the other side, the yields on the United States Treasury bonds inched a little bit higher still on Monday after a relentless climb of last week that saw this 10-year note temporarily hit a 14-year high, about 4.3% there. Of course, according to some of the Federal Reserve officials, they were concerned with the pace of interest rate hikes ahead of the November meeting. And definitely it has been always a race between the yields and also the stock market, and as well inflation, of course, that is heating up in the United States and across the globe. That is, of course, making the Central Bank of the United States to hike the rate there on the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, we also had certain companies particularly stand out after the day's trades, and particularly here we're looking at the tech companies like Apple that also performed extremely well in the day's trading on Monday, and several other companies as well had a very good time on the stock market. Now, indexes like the Dow led, and of course the Chinese stocks tanked there on the global market scene. We saw very many Chinese stocks come down as well. Briefly, that's what's happening globally in terms of the stock market. Remember, these indexes track the biggest companies in the world. Looking at the Dow Jones, it tracks over 30 companies that are, of course, tracked by their price. It is a price-weighted average index. And also looking at the S&P 500, which is a market capitalization weighted index, tracking the top 500 American companies there. Now, the Nasdaq tracks the top 3,000 tech companies, including Apple, including Google and Facebook and the like, and everything concerning technology under the Nasdaq. And you can always follow up there and get to know what's happening globally, so you can get to understand the global financial markets and how they do get to impact our local financial markets here in East Africa and in Uganda. Moving quickly back to our markets here in Uganda, coming direct to the Uganda Stock Exchange, we had a slight decline compared to the last day of trading of last week, and looking at also contraction in the number of companies that participated. However, the turnover really seemed very good because of the very much active participation of Umeme, who came in as the biggest move on the Uganda Stock Exchange. Now, checking out also some of the other top movers, we had MTN coming as a top mover, but not as much as Wumeme. Wumeme really had a very good movement on the stock market yesterday after having recorded close to, let's see, about 6.79 million shares that were recorded, and a very huge turnover as well that was registered, close to about 1.36 billion Ugandan shillings. We are talking about a billion shillings that was transacted on one company on the stock exchange yesterday. So, meaning we had a pretty good volume. And we understand Wumeme, when it comes to turnover, is one of the biggest contributors to the monthly and even the quarterly turnovers, at least for the Uganda Stock Exchange. If you've been following the quarterly bulletins from the Capital Markets Authority, we understand in the past 2 quarters of 2022, Wumeme led all the companies via turnover there on the stock market. And we are seeing that as we close into the 4th quarter, as we wind up, of course, the year is still coming out strong, and many foreign investors are coming in, others are moving out, and of course, their price has also been quite stable, maintained at 200 shillings throughout the daily trades, despite the fact that we had such huge volumes trade on the company there yesterday. We had Stanbic Bank as well coming as a top mover, the second biggest top mover on the markets there at the Uganda Stock Exchange as well. And MTN also followed suit at about 11,250 shares that were transacted. However, the day ended with 3 gainers and 4 losers, and none of these were movers, meaning we had companies like Centum, Nation Media Group, Equity. Most of them, actually all of them, were cross-listed from Nairobi Stock Exchange, and generally we don't have any movement on those. We rarely do have movement on such companies, so the prices were shifted along with forces from the Nairobi Stock Exchange. The top movers, rather top gainers, were led by Centum Investments, however, who led by about 0.78% share price appreciation, closing at 289.97 Ugandan shillings. As well as we had Equity Bank appreciate by close to 0.68% there on the stock market. Nation Media Group also appreciated by 0.53% and closed at 503.20 Ugandan shillings on the stock market. On the bottom loser side, we still had mainly cross listings like KCB, who came out at the bottom with a 3.65% price depreciation, closing at 1,149.50 Ugandan shillings on the stock market. And Jubilee Holdings followed suit amongst the bottom losers, losing at 1.03% and closing at 7,469.38. The East African Breweries Limited Company also reported a loss of about 0.39% and closed at 5,307.19. Kenya Airways came in at a loss of about 0.1% and closed at 120.45. A pretty fair day of trading. Yes, Wumeme had a good time, but not that good for other companies on the stock exchange, as we saw some slight decline in the number of companies. But in terms of volume, of course, because of the big trade on Wumeme of over 6.7 million shares, we had an improvement in the volume by over 818%. And when we look at the turnover, also because of Wumeme, who had the biggest turnover, record turnover at least for this quarter, of about 1.6 billion Ugandan shillings, which is registered as an improvement of about 816% in terms of the turnover on the stock market yesterday. Looking at the benchmark index, it was negatively affected because of course, poor participation, but also a contraction in number of companies that appreciated there in price. Basically looking at also the local stocks not performing that well. And we saw that it dropped over 6.63 points, and that was a 0.53 daily, 53% daily loss, and closing at 1,248.13 points. And we're looking at a 1 week loss of about 0.75% and a 4 week gain of about 0.28%, but an overall year-to-date loss of 12.15% still on the Uganda Stock Exchange All-Share Index, which is the benchmark, basically giving us a picture that we had a decline in average performance, generally speaking, on the Uganda Stock Exchange yesterday. Local company index tracks the local companies that are listed on the stock exchange, maintained its value because, of course, the local stocks were well balanced out there without any participation from most of them, but big participation from Stanbic, MTN and Wumeme, and the value was maintained at 271.77 points, making it a 1 week gain of about 0.18% and a 4 week gain of 0.18% as well, and looking at a year-to-date loss of 16.29% on the local company index, which tracks the aggregate performance of the local stocks that are listed on the Uganda Stock Exchange. My friend, that's data coming in from the Uganda Securities Exchange as per the daily trades on yesterday's trading. Remember, you can participate in this trade if you just simply get to open yourself an account with the Uganda Securities Exchange Securities Central Depository. To do this, it's quite simple. You can visit www.use.or.ug and be able to visit their easy portal, or you can actually type in Google easy portal and you go at Uganda Securities Exchange, and they will give you a simple 1, 2, 3 steps to be able to open an account. You just need your national identification card, your passport photograph, which you can upload, and definitely the account will be opened for you. Getting into the stock market can be tricky, and I understand many people still have many questions on how this thing really works, on how the stock market operates. Have no worries. This show will bring you experts to break down some of the mysteries, some of the myths about the stock market, and help you get to understand. Remember, you cannot invest without understanding what you're investing in. That will lead to a disaster, catastrophe indeed. So you must understand first, and definitely one way of doing that is keeping your eyes glued on SMART24 TV and watching financial markets, as we also get to drive you into the financial markets. You can hit us up on social media if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, anything you would want to learn more about or get elucidated more about. You can visit us on SMART24 TV and get to comment at SMART24 TV on Twitter or on our YouTube live stream at SMART24 TV Live for more. Looking at generally the stock market in Uganda, we have 18 companies, and of these, 10 of them are domestically listed equities. Others cross listings, mainly from NSE, Nairobi Stock Exchange. And this exchange has been in existence for the past 25 years, offering you opportunity to save and invest for long-term benefit. And so you don't have to worry. This is not a hoax. It's not a way to steal money. It is a way to contribute to your savings by adding value to yourself, adding value to your family. You can buy stock for your children. You can buy stock for your family, for future investments. You can keep this money in the stock market just in case, so you know that you have something to fall back on in case other things fail in business, or you can use it as a strategy for making more money on the capital gains. You know, you never know. You just need to have to put in the time to be able to understand how the market really works. Now, let's cross over to our friends in Kenya. Nairobi Stock Exchange had a similar experience, close to what we experienced yesterday on the Uganda Stock Exchange. And looking at, for example, the companies that participated, we had about 49 of the total 65 companies that are listed on the NSE participate in trades. And 19 of these ended up as gainers and 24 as losers. The top gainers were led by Longhorn Publishers, who came in as a surprise, of course, after having lost on last week's trading. Longhorn Publishers came in as a top gainer this time round on the stock market in Nairobi, after having led the gainers at about a 9.79% price appreciation, closing the day with about 3.7 Kenyan shillings per share. Longhorn was followed, of course, by Sanlam. Sanlam Kenya is having a good start of the week as well, coming in as a gainer with a 7.93%. East African Cables also came in as a top gainer with a 6.6% price appreciation. And Olympia Capital Holdings also came in as a top gainer at a 6% price appreciation. On the losing side, EGADS came in as a top, bottom loser. I think starting the week really badly, just like he ended the week last week. And after having, of course, traded on the day, we had about 8.53% shed off from their price, closing at 11.80 Kenyan shillings per share. Liberty Kenya Holdings also lost on the stock market in Nairobi after having shed off over 6.78% of their price on the Nairobi Stock Exchange. Stanley Bahari income rate also lost about 6.77%, and Samia Africa lost about 5.69% on the stock exchange in Nairobi. However, on the side of the movers, Safaricom came in as a top mover, back at its peak, and of course recording a volume much smaller, of course, than what we're used to, but still the biggest volume that was traded of about 687,200 shares that were recorded. Of course, this shows significantly how much also the volumes declined yesterday on the stock market in Nairobi. We had about 71% decline, particularly in the volume, as well as 85% decline in the turnover, which closed at about 39.9 million Kenyan shillings on the stock market in terms of turnover on the Kenyan market there. And we had about 2.55 million shares that were traded still, which is a contraction in the volume that was witnessed, particularly looking at the bigger movers like Kenya Power and Lighting Company, KCB, NCBA, who usually have millions of shares traded on a single day. Well, that wasn't the case for yesterday's trades, and we had a humble trading with Kenya Power and Lighting Company coming in the second biggest movement position at about 595,800 shares. KenGen came in as a third top mover at around 280,200 shares, and Kenya Reinsurance Corporation gained by about 202,300 shares on the stock market. Regarding the performance of the Nairobi markets, the benchmark shed of about 0.53 points and closed at about 127.77 points, and this was a one-week loss of 1.64%, meaning Kenya is back now in the losses. Of course, comparing this performance with last week, we had a pretty much better performance, especially on the all-share index, the benchmark index for the Nairobi markets here. But we're seeing now a one-week loss of about 1.64% that was registered. Of course, probably because of the big trades that were registered last week, which is, of course, becoming hard to catch up with in this coming week. Looking at the 4-week loss, we had about 5.33%. which was shed off on the monthly performance, and an overall year-to-date loss which increased from 22 to 23% yesterday. Other remarkable indexes like the NSE 20 and the NSE 25 up. On the other hand, particularly the NSE 20 had about 0.03% added to its value, and the NSE 25 had about 0.37% on its value that was added there. Now, this gives you a brief summary of what took place on the Nairobi Stock Exchange. Get to Nairobi Stock Exchange website for more. They have various products. Unlike us here, they do have derivatives, exchange traded funds. Of course, Altex also offers you an exchange traded fund across regional equities in East Africa, so you can consider that. But Nairobi Stock Exchange still has this market, and definitely they will get you some of these products your way if you get to make some research and get to learn more about their products. That's it from Nairobi Stock Exchange. Now, coming up in the next session, I had an interview with Mr. Chimoli Mosazi at Standard Bank Group Securities. We were talking about how you can take advantage of the current economic situation in terms of investments. Of course, looking at the global market, it's not a very good outlook. The US stock markets in particular are tumbling. The Ugandan markets, except last week, we still had a very volatile market with our all-share index declining. Most of the local companies also declining in terms of turnover and performance. But how can we take advantage of the bear market and choose shares wisely in this market? Of course, Warren Buffett and some of other very seasoned investors, they say it is always safer to go out and buy more when the streets are bloody, meaning when things are going wrong. That is the best time to go out and fish for the markets. So what can you choose, and how can you choose it as you, of course, maneuver the markets in such turbulent times within a beleaguered economy? That's what's coming up on the show after the quick breather. I'll catch you tomorrow, same time, same place. Goodbye for now. SMART24 TV, we drive your business.